Hello, this is Denise with Mint Green Mama, and today I'm just kind of doing an impromptu video real quick about backup decks. And it's just because I'm curious to know if I don't know, I feel compelled to get backup decks to certain other decks that I really like, and I'm just wondering if anybody else anybody else feels like that. So I just wanted to kind of talk about the reasons that I have some of my decks as backups. A couple of them, like this one, is the 78 Tarot Nautical, and this one's not even been opened. I have an open one that I use, and then I just happened to get this as like a 2-pack on their Etsy shop, and so, but I mean, I wanted that instead of the single deck because I thought, well, if I really like that deck, and I hadn't used it before. I had seen it. I had seen a review of it, but I hadn't used it before. And I thought, well, if I really like that deck, I want to be able to, like, if something happens to it, like, I don't want to be, without that deck. Because some decks, you're not sure, well, can I come back later and buy that? That's the thing, because I've actually put off buying several decks and then come back later to get them, and they have been out of print. So I've started, I think, to get a little bit more paranoid in my later years about that. And so, like this one, I just bought like 2 of them at one time without even using the first deck. And I think that's a little bit of overkill, although I do love this deck. I do love it. So I'm not upset about that, but I don't know. It just, I've been thinking lately, like I've been writing out my plans for my depth year for 2019. And I'm thinking, like, do I really need to get so many backup decks? And I don't know. This is another one. This one I think actually kind of have a good reason for. This one's not open yet, but this is the Enchanted Map Oracle deck by Colette Baron-Reid. And this one I actually this last year I used it a lot. And my kids would get a hold of it sometimes, and some of the cards got bent. So I ended up getting this just so that I could have, as like the cards like if they got too bent to use, that I could replace them, or I could just use a different deck. So I think that would be a good reason to get another deck, like a backup deck. Like that would be good. But see, then what happened is, and that's a whole nother story, is it just, for me, this Oracle deck, like I tried really hard to use it. I tried really, really hard. And I use it like every day for the longest time. And I just don't know that it's actually going to be a good fit for me. I gave it a good shot, and I even got this backup deck because I use it so much, and I keep going back and forth on this one. Like all Colette Baron-Reid's decks. Like I love them. I love the artwork. I think they're gorgeous. I want to be able to use them, but to me, like I have a hard time using them without looking at the book, and so. I don't know. Anyway, that's another story. So those are 2 unopened decks that I just have sitting around. Another example of a backup deck that I purchased is I have, this is my all-time favorite tarot deck, and I've had this particular deck for a long time, and it is the Robin Wood Tarot. So I love this deck. I love the artwork. I love the colors. I love the portrayal of, some of the images, and a little bit more like, this is like I like this devil. This is one of my favorite devil cards. And some of the images are very similar to Rider-Waite-Smith images, and some are a little more pagan-y, but anyway, I just love this deck. And I've had this one for so long. And it's got, this one is like an earlier cardstock that's actually more cardboard-like. I don't even remember when I got this deck. Like, this is ancient old. So, and some of the cards have gotten a little bit bent. So I ended up buying another deck, which, is fine, I think. And I used that one sometimes. This one I use for tarot spells. This is like my deck that I use just for that. And I use my other decks for reading. And then I ended up getting another backup deck. So I actually have 3 copies of the Robin Wood Tarot. Yeah. So I think that might be a bit much, but it's like one of my favorite decks. Like when I'm thinking like, oh, the, you know, 2 of Wands, like the image that I go to is the image from the Robin Wood Tarot. So it's just like the one that I think of all the time. So I have that one. Like I feel almost embarrassed at the amount of, I'm embarrassed at the amount of backup decks I have. Like this is part of my depth year plans is to not buy backup decks, but then I'm like thinking I need to hurry up and get a couple extra decks before the end of the year. Like that's going to be a whole nother video because I have a problem that I am dealing with, but in the meantime, it's pretty embarrassing. So this one, Navigators Tarot of the Mystic Sea. This is actually going to be my deck for January of 2019, and I have such a weird relationship with this deck. I love the backs. I did not like this, the images. I saw this deck like a long time ago, and I've always thought about purchasing it. Like I used to see it like in stores, and I never did because of I think it's the colors. I think more than just the images, I think it's the actual colors, and it just didn't sit well with me, and I never bought it. And then I saw it pop up on Amazon a while back, just this year, and I thought I'm going to give that a try. And then I found out that there are like fiction books that the author, I believe her name was Julia, Turk, wrote that go with this, and then there's a manual, so I got all those. And the more that I delve into it, the more that I really, really love this deck. And so it's another one where I'm like, I'm not sure if it's out of print. Like you can still get this for really inexpensive on Amazon. So it's a US Games deck. So, you know, I don't know. But I just thought, you know, just in case like they ever stop making this or I can't get it anymore, like let me get a backup deck because I do like it so much. And it's really inexpensive. You know, so I thought, okay, let me get an extra deck. So I did. And then I got another one. So, well, and the reason for that, okay, so this one, I have this sacred, you know, space area that I have for myself downstairs. And then I also, but I can't always come down here depending on if, like my schedule. When I'm watching the kids, I am upstairs, like, you know, watching the kids all the time. And I really ever have a time to come down and just have time for myself without being available to be right there most of the time. So I like to have some of my tarot decks upstairs for me to be able to get to when I have time, you know, upstairs, like the kids are sleeping or they're, you know, and I still need to be close by, but so I can't come all the way down here, but there, you know, I have time to myself. Like I like to have some decks upstairs to work with. So that was one of the reasons, like I have an extra deck for upstairs and I have one for downstairs. So that was kind of the thinking behind that. And like, as I explored, like I've been exploring this in my journal, like, why do I do this? And that's part of my working through, and setting guidelines for myself for my depth year, because I do have a tendency to overdo it when it comes to books and tarot decks and stuff. So anyway, I think, I don't know if I'm just way out there. I don't know if anyone else does this, but there's got to be at least one other person. I hope I'm not the other one. So the next one is my Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot. I just love this deck so much. And this was one of the decks like I knew about, but I didn't actually purchase until this year, 2018. And I just loved it so much. And then I got the Queen Alice Tarot by Dame Darcy, which I really, really love too. And, but I just really love the cardstock on this deck. And I love like the kind of like, almost like a really muted gold, like not a super shiny gold, like a muted gold, like gilding on the side. Like I love this deck, and the just like the the feel of it is so nice. So I wanted to get another deck. And the crazy thing is now I wanted an extra Queen Alice deck too. Such a problem. So those are decks that those are always out where I can get to them. Especially this one, my Mermaid Tarot. It's always out where I can get to it. I have this one set up down here, and if I get another one, then I might I do have another one. But if I get like another Queen Alice Tarot, I don't know, like I like to have one like tucked away. I know in theory that something could happen to my house. We could have a natural disaster. We could have, something happen inside. Like I could lose all my decks. When we lived right before we moved here, we lived on the East Coast, and we had to evacuate. In the time that we lived there, just the last few years, we had to have mandatory evacuations for hurricanes twice. And once we thought was going to be really bad, and we were lucky, we were fine. But it makes you think about like, why am I spending all my money and my time accumulating more possessions when I know that they could just all be gone, just like that, So it's just something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's a struggle between my intellectually knowing that I need to spend more time on enjoying the stuff that I have, and then the part of my brain that's like, no, something could happen to that deck, and then you wouldn't, maybe you wouldn't have the money to purchase another one at that time, or you wouldn't be able to get your hands on it again, and you need to get one so you have it, so you have a backup. Like there's like that part of my brain, like that really fear-based part of my brain is like, no, it's really something really bad could happen to that deck, and then you never be able to use it again, and I don't know. So that's the struggle, the internal struggle I have. That's why I think set guidelines like that'll help me make better, hopefully better decisions in the next year. Not that these are necessarily poor decisions, and I think having some backup decks is great, but this all started when I was a lot younger, and I took a tarot class at my local metaphysical shop, and my teacher had these huge Rider-Waite cards, like huge, and he was like, and I have like 5 of these decks in a drawer in my house because you never know when they're going to stop making your favorite deck. So if you have a deck that you really like, you better get extra. And I mean, it had never occurred to me, that was a thing. And he's like, yeah, they stopped making this, I guess the large size, or the one that he liked, and they stopped making that version. And he's like, now you can't, you have to, they're so expensive, and, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I think that planted something in my brain that I still, because I still think about that conversation. Like, even still, I'm like, well, I'm not just making that up. Like, somebody told me that, I don't know. This is why journaling's good. Journaling's good. And this is kind of like my verbal journaling to myself. If you're listening, I don't know if this resonates with you, but, it could give you, this is my reasons. And I don't know, some of these reasons, until I actually talk about them, I don't, or write them down, I don't always recognize what they are. So this is what helps me. Anyway, this is my last deck that I have out to talk about, and I think there's one more that I have a backup deck of, but I don't have right here, which is Tarot of the Spirit, which is really inexpensive on Amazon, and I have, and she has these really good books. I want to say her name is Joyce Eakins. I apologize if that is not correct because I do not have it sitting here in front of me, but it's a really good, companion book. And then there's her book about the Tarot of the Spirit and the Kabbalah, which I haven't gotten into yet, but I'm really excited to hopefully have that on my short list of things to do in my deck year. So we'll see. But so this is the last one I have out right now. And this is the Starman Tarot, which is relatively new to me. It came out pretty recently, and I wasn't sure what to expect with this one. I am a fan of David Bowie, but I'm not a super fan. Not because he's not awesome, because he's an awesome person, but just because that's, that was just like, you can only appreciate so many things, and that just, wasn't super on my radar, but I still was a fan, and so I got this deck, and the more that I look through the cards, like I opened it, I did a review and an unboxing, and I really liked it. And then the more that I looked through the cards, and the more that I worked with the cards, and then I read the some of the companion book, and I just really, the colors just draw me in. And I like that there's some information in the book, but they really encourage you to come up with your own interpretations, and there's so much to go on. Like, this is the Chariot, which is actually my card of the year. 2019 is the Chariot. And there's just so much visually going on in this card to really get into and to go on. And so there's sacred geometry, there's just so much. And I could just sit here and get lost in this card. So I really like them. And the thing is about this particular deck is I don't really like the cardstock. I really don't. And so I was like, oh, well, I want to work with these cards, but I'm afraid that they'll get bent and they'll get chipped, and yada yada yada. And then they were kind of they were really discounted on Amazon. Staying out of Amazon is on my list of things to do for 2019. And I've been thinking a lot about this. I don't know if you can tell, I've been thinking a lot about this. Purchasing and consumerism stuff. That's definitely been on my mind a lot. But so I got another deck. And so I'm hoping that, I made some good decisions. I'm hoping that if it turns out that some of these cards, I don't end up appreciating or using, that I can find good homes for, eventually. So I'm going to wait and see how this all goes down. But so I'm just, there's a long way around, for all of this, but basically, so I think there's some good reasons to have backup decks. If it's deck that, if it's a limited edition of a deck, and that you really love it and you plan on working with it a lot, I mean, I think that is a good reason to have a backup deck. If I think, the one that I have that were my kids, I actually bent some cards, and I did need a replacement because I was using it every day. I think that's a good reason to have a backup deck. And as far as my own personal experience, if I have one deck that I'm working with every single day, I do like to have one. It's going to be nice to have one deck down here where I can use it in my sacred space, and one deck upstairs where I can use it when I have less personal personal time. So I mean, I think there's definitely some reasons, but I feel where I went overboard personally is thinking that, well, I have a backup deck, but maybe I need another deck. So having multiple copies of one deck, I think maybe for me might be a bit too much. And then where I bought two decks right off the bat without having worked with it at all, I think that might have been too much for me. So personally, yeah, because I have at least the Robin Wood and the Navigators Tarot of the Mystic Sea. I will have 3 copies of those. Yeah, that's a lot. I think that's a lot. So anyway, so those are my thoughts on backup decks. I think that having a few is okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially if they're ones that you use a lot. But for me personally, I feel like if it's not something that I'm working with all the time, or if it's something I don't know that I already love, I think that that was a bit much. So I can kind of see a little bit of extra, maybe some poor purchasing decisions on my part when I look at this. And so I can see, something to work with in 2019 is I'm going to just enjoy the decks that I have. And I'm going to try not to let that fear of like, oh, but what if something happened? I can't see it comes down to sometimes like I have decks where I can't go and buy another one right now. Like I think my Da Vinci Enigma Tarot, like I don't think that I could just go buy another one that I know of. I don't think that one's in print anymore. So then I feel like, well, then I don't want to use it as much because what if something happened to it while I use it? So I think that that's something that I'm going to have to get over. In working with the decks that I have and just enjoying them and just realizing that something could happen to my decks at any time, whether I use them or not, and that it would be beneficial for me to just enjoy the decks that I have and appreciate them. And if something happens to them, well, then at least they got some enjoyment and some use and they didn't just sit on a shelf and collect dust. Like, it's okay to get my decks out. It's okay to enjoy them. If I don't have a backup, that's fine. I can just still enjoy the ones that I have and to try to let that fear kind of trickle away, just let that ease away. So that is my thoughts on backup decks and where I'm headed from here on out into the new year. So I'm interested to hear if you get backup decks, and if so, what are your reasons? Maybe I can feel more normal, or maybe not. I don't know. All right. Have a good one. Bye.